If you thought this story was wild, wait until you hear what happened next. Drop a comment below and let me know how you would have handled Kerren. Don't forget to hit that like button if you're rooting for the underdog. Subscribe for more crazy stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming up next. The sun was melting into the horizon, painting the orchard in gold and firelight as laughter echoed under the white canvas of the event tent. Strings of soft lights crisscrossed between rows of apple trees, their warm glow mingling with the scent of slow-roasted brisket and cinnamon cider. I stood near the bar, holding a glass of sweet tea, watching my little sister spin barefoot on the ewe, grass in her white dress, as her fiancé tried and failed to dip her. This party was for them a celebration of their engagement and a chance to bring the family together on my land, a ranch I had worked nearly a decade to build with my own hands. The orchard stretched for acres bordered only by the distant fence line and the rolling hills beyond it. Guests milled about, laughing and dancing. Kids ran between the trees, their feet crunching fallen leaves, and somewhere behind the tent, the band played an acoustic set that felt like it belonged to a dream. Then I heard it. Not the music, not the laughter. A diesel engine humming too close. Then another sound, the sharp thunk of a gate swinging open and slamming shut. I stepped past the drink table, walking toward the driveway, just as a group of men in neon vests came into view, hauling measuring wheels, clipboards, and orange cones. One of them nearly clipped a table leg as he marched straight into the center of the tent, muttering to himself. My guests started noticing. The music wavered. A woman near the buffet blinked in confusion as one of the workers unrolled caution tape 2 feet from her chair. "Excuse me," I said, stepping forward. "What are you doing?" The man barely looked at me. "HOA inspection, noise levels, plot compliance." I stared at him. "What HOA? This is private land. You're trespassing." He shrugged like it was an opinion. Then 2 more workers arrived, dragging a long cord from a truck parked just beyond my orchard gate. One of them began planting a pole with a blinking device into the soft earth next to one of my apple trees. My blood started to boil. I raised my voice. "Get that out of my ground right now." "Who sent you?" A voice rang out from behind the tent. High, sharp, clipped like stilettos on concrete. "I did." She emerged like a storm. Mid-50s maybe, with oversized sunglasses, red lipstick, and a blazer far too formal for a rural evening. She held a clipboard like it was a sword, and walked as if the dirt beneath her heels was personally offensive. The kind of woman who would sue a hummingbird for flying too close to her petunias. "I'm Kerren Fielding, president of the Ridge Valley Estates Homeowners Association," she announced with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We received multiple noise complaints this evening, and as such are well within our rights to perform an inspection." I blinked. "Ma'am, this isn't Ridge Valley. This is my property. The gate back there separates the HOA zone from my land." "I'm not part of your association," she snorted. "Well, audible nuisances don't stop at property lines, do they? Your little concert here is disturbing several of my residents. The bylaws grant us latitude in such cases." I laughed once, short and humorless. "There are no bylaws here. This is a working ranch. The only rules here are mine." Kerren tilted her head, as if regarding a misbehaving child. "Oh, sweetheart, land doesn't work like that. Just because you put a fence around some trees doesn't mean you're exempt from order. The HOA has responsibilities." I stepped forward, lowering my voice. "And I have rights. You and your workers are trespassing. If you don't leave now, I'll call the sheriff. Her smile widened. Go ahead. The sheriff knows we're here. We've done this dance before. Usually. With less attitude, the workers continued placing cones. One knelt to examine a power cable leading from my stage. A musician looked over confused mouth still open mid-verse. My guests were staring, whispering. My sister walked up beside me, gripping my arm. Is this really happening? She whispered. Clenched my jaw. Apparently, Kerren walked forward again, taking in the tent with thinly veiled contempt. It's quite the party. Must be nice to flaunt your wealth like this. How many acres is it again? 40? 50? 56, I said coldly. She clicked her tongue. That's a lot of land for one man. No wonder you think you're above the rules. I felt something twist in my gut. It wasn't just the intrusion. It was the audacity. The casual way she acted like everything here was hers to regulate. Like my life's work was just some messy backyard spilling into her neighborhood's perfection. One of the guests tried to lighten the mood, offering Kerren a cider. She waved it off like poison. Another guest filmed quietly from the back corner camera, tilted downward, but still running. Kerren finally turned to leave, snapping her fingers at her workers. We'll be filing a formal report. Expect notice of violation. Within the week, I stepped toward her one last time. You're making a mistake. This land is not under your control. You don't get to make the rules here. She turned slowly, eyes hidden behind her glasses. Everyone thinks that until they get a letter from us. You'll see. You orchard types always think you're untouchable. But order always finds its way. She walked away, heels clicking on gravel clipboard under her arm. Her workers followed in silence, some of them clearly uncomfortable. The truck rumbled to life again, backing out through the gate and disappearing into the descending night. The music didn't return. The band quietly packed up. Guests offered me sympathetic glances, unsure of what to say. My sister looked like she wanted to cry. I stood there under the glowing tent, surrounded by silence and cider, and the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. Kerren had invaded my home, disrupted my family's celebration, and left a stain on what was supposed to be a perfect night, and she was going to regret it. 3 days passed before the letter arrived, and when it did, it was sealed in an envelope so stiff and official it practically radiated smugness. The return address was stamped with the Ridge Valley HOA emblem, a ridiculous golden gavel over an E, pristine lawn, and inside was a 3-page notice listing noise ordinance violations, unauthorized gathering proximity to residential boundaries, and something laughable called visual disharmony. I read it twice, standing in the kitchen with a mug of black coffee going cold in my hand. Each line pulsed with arrogance, the kind that only comes from someone who truly believes the rules were made by them and for them. I walked out onto the porch, watching the early morning mist curl between the orchard rows. Birds chirped, unaware of the bureaucratic warfare inching toward my land. The letter was absurd, but it wasn't harmless. Kerren wasn't just throwing empty threats. She was building a paper trail, setting the stage for something bigger. If she could establish a pattern of violations, she could try to pressure the county, or worse, try to rope in some land reassessment board under the guise of regional impact. I wasn't naive. I'd dealt with zoning headaches before permits inspections. All the dull administrative hoops you jump through when your property bumps up against suburban sprawl. But never like this. Never so personal. The next incident came before the ink on the letter dried. I was out checking irrigation lines near the north fence when I noticed movement behind the tree line. A white van marked with a Ridge Valley HOA. Decal pulled up to the rear gate, and out popped two men with clipboards and reflective vests. They didn't knock. They didn't announce themselves. They just unlocked the gate and walked in like they owned the place. I cut across the field, intercepting them near the old hay shed. "You lost, or just bowled," I said, voice flat. One of them didn't even look up. "Routine safety inspection. Mandated after last weekend's violation notice." I stepped between them, and the shed arms crossed. "You've got 5 seconds to turn around. This is private land. You're trespassing again." The second man hesitated, then nudged his partner. "Come on, we'll file for access next time." The first one grumbled, but turned around muttering under his breath. The van doors slammed, and the engine roared to life, leaving a track of tire marks behind. I stood there, jaw tight, fingers twitching. She was escalating. Later that evening, I drove down to the county recorder's office. I pulled every document tied to my land plat maps, zoning codes, legal easements. I needed to know every inch of leverage. I had. The clerk, an older man with kind eyes and a thermos that smelled like chili, gave me a sympathetic look as I loaded a stack of paper onto the counter. "Let me guess," he said. "Kerren Fielding." I raised an eyebrow. "She make a habit of this," he nodded slowly. "She tried to annex a stretch of river trail last year, claimed it disrupted the serenity of her cul-de-sac. Almost sued the Parks Department." I laughed, but it came out hollow. "And she still has her position. She's loud organized, and knows just enough law to be dangerous. She's also got the HOA board wrapped around her finger. Most of 'em just sign what she writes." I thanked him and left with a folder thick enough to stun a cow. When I got home, I stayed up until 2 reading. By dawn, I knew 3 things. 1, my land was fully outside Ridge Valley jurisdiction. 2, there was a decades-old boundary agreement buried in county records that reaffirmed the independence of ranch properties in this zone. And 3, Kerren wasn't just wrong. She was breaking the law, but confronting her head-on wouldn't work. Not with her board. Not with her army of clipboard-carrying minions. She needed to be cornered publicly, undeniably. I needed her to overstep in a way that couldn't be cleaned up with legal jargon or HOA spin. I needed her to expose her own arrogance. The opportunity came the next weekend. My sister had planned a second, smaller gathering, mostly family, and close friends. This time we kept it intimate. No loud music, no stage, just folding chairs beneath the trees and soft jazz humming from a single speaker. It was the kind of evening so quiet you could hear the bees drowsily buzzing from bloom to bloom. And still she came. At exactly 7:15, headlights appeared through the orchard gate. A sleek black SUV stopped just beyond the tent, and out stepped Kerren in another of her stiff blazers, phone in one hand, camera in the other. She didn't speak to anyone, just started filming the gathering. Her lens sweeping slowly across faces, tables, the grill. People shifted uncomfortably. My uncle stood up, ready to approach, but I stopped him with a shake of my head. Let her dig her own hole. She marched toward the tent, narrating her footage. As you can see, multiple families, unauthorized, gathering extension cords, in contact with, vegetation potential fire hazard, the smell of open flame. No visible permits. I watched her quietly. My sister looked like she was going to cry again. My father's jaw was locked tighter than a vice. Kerren moved closer, filming the fire pit like it was radioactive. Then she stepped onto the grass, pulling a laminated rule sheet from her purse. Like a sword. That was her mistake. She was now a documented repeat trespasser entering private land without consent while filming minors and disrupting a private function with no legal basis. And this time, it was all on camera. Not mine. Hers. The guests, too. At least 3 people were recording her live to social media. One of them, a teenager, with over 500,000 followers. Comments flooded in immediately. Who is this woman? Is she serious? Wait, is this even legal? Is this her land? Kerren on the ranch started trending before she even finished. Her rant, Kerren didn't notice the phones. She never noticed when she wasn't being admired or feared. She just kept talking. Recording kept burying herself with every word. I didn't stop her. Not yet. The next morning, the video had exploded. I woke up to dozens of notifications, texts, missed calls, and a rapidly growing number of tags. The footage of Kerren barging into my orchard with her plastic badge and shrill commentary was everywhere. News sites started picking it up, first local, then regional. One headline read, HOA President Invades Private Ranch, while screaming about jazz music, and another simply said, Meet the Queen of Entitled. By noon, the video had passed 1 million views, and the comments section was a firestorm of disbelief, outrage, and memes. One clip of her pointing at the fire pit while yelling possible combustion risk was now overdubbed with dramatic movie music and titled The Fire Marshal of Doom. Kerren, however, was oblivious, or more likely in denial. She sent another letter, this one more aggressive, citing violations for fire code disturbance of community harmony, and even something called excessive cheerfulness, which I assumed she made up just to sound formal. She warned me that the HOA board would be discussing the matter at their next meeting, and I was strongly encouraged to attend. I showed up exactly on time. Not early, not late. I wore jeans boots and the same denim shirt I'd worn the day she first trespassed. The meeting was held in the Ridge Valley Community Center, a sterile beige building that smelled like lemon cleaner and wilted ambition. The room was packed. Not just board members, but residents, curious neighbors, even a couple of reporters pretending to be volunteers, with notepads. Cameras rolled silently in the back corners. Kerren stood at the podium, perfectly poised, hair-tight makeup, sharp holding her clipboard like scripture. She launched into a presentation complete with printed screenshots, timelines, and a ridiculous pie chart titled Percentage of Auditory Pollution by Source. 98% was labeled orchard noise. The other 2% was marked dog barking and distant wind chimes. She spoke with a practiced cadence, pausing for emphasis, voice dripping with righteousness. She said things like destabilizing influence and neighborhood integrity and ecological disruption. Then she invited me to respond. She did it with the smirk of someone expecting an apology. I walked to the podium, hands empty. No notes, no props, just truth. This land was never part of Ridge Valley, I said calmly. It is a fully independent property, zoned as agricultural under county law, and reaffirmed by the Boundary Agreement of 1992. Your president has no authority over my ranch, and every time she stepped onto my land, she committed trespass. Your complaints are not backed by any jurisdiction, and your enforcement actions are not legal. But more importantly, they're not decent. Your president harassed my family during a private celebration, filmed minors without consent, and posted that footage online. She turned a quiet orchard into a battleground. And for what? Because she heard music from a mile away. Murmurs spread through the room. I let them ripple before continuing. I have filed a formal complaint with the county, and I'm pursuing a cease and desist order. If this harassment continues, I will seek damages. But I didn't come here just to talk about law. I came here to remind you that being part of a community does not mean controlling your neighbors. It means respecting them. Your president forgot that." Kerren opened her mouth, but the board chair, an older man with a weary look, held up a hand. "Thank you. We've heard enough for now." I sat down. Kerren looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. One of the board members leaned toward another, whispering, and both looked toward me with something close to regret. The meeting continued, but the energy had shifted. I was no longer the outsider. I was the rancher who stood his ground. The next few days were quiet. No letters, no visits. Then I got a call from the sheriff. He was chuckling when I answered. "Thought you'd want to know. Kerren tried to file an injunction against your gatherings. Claimed public disturbance and property risk. Judge tossed it in 5 minutes." I laughed. "Let me guess. She's not taking it well." "You could say that. She tried to say your orchard was a secret event venue, accused you of running a business without a license." Judge asked her if she thought apple trees were a sign of organized crime. It wasn't over. Not yet. But it was crumbling. Her power was built on bluster and fear and the illusion of control. Now that the light was on her, she couldn't hide the cracks. And then came the real break. A drone video surfaced. Not mine. Someone else's. It showed her SUV parked just beyond my gate engine running while she directed her workers onto my land. It showed her climbing over the fence on foot during one of her unauthorized visits, pacing among the trees like a surveyor. That footage, combined with her own recordings, became a storm she couldn't contain. The county opened an investigation. Reporters reached out for comment. The HOA board called an emergency meeting, this time without inviting her to speak. I watched from the back as one board member after another expressed concern over her actions, over the legal exposure, over the flood of bad press. One man read aloud a letter from a Ridge Valley resident who'd lived there 20 years, saying, "Kerren no longer represented the values of their community. When the vote came, it was swift and merciless. Kerren Fielding was removed as HOA president effective immediately. Her name would remain on the board roster, but with no voting power and no authority." She stormed out of the room without a word, chin high but shoulders hunched. Her clipboard stayed behind. Outside, a group of teenagers were filming a dance in the parking lot. The music was loud, cheerful, echoing off the walls. Kerren paused only for a moment, watching them with a mix of confusion and disdain. Then kept walking, head down toward her car. No one followed. I stood by my truck, watching the last rays of sun hit the hills beyond the neighborhood. The battle wasn't just won. It was buried. Her reign of pettiness was over, and the orchard was quiet once more. But the final chapter hadn't been written. Not yet. A week passed, and the dust began to settle. The media circus around Kerren had slowed, but the aftermath lingered. People still whispered in the streets, and posts about the Kerren on the ranch saga still popped up from time to time. But there was something else beneath the surface, a change I hadn't expected. It wasn't just that I had won. It was the sudden weight of victory. Kerren's defeat was supposed to be the final moment, the climax, the end of the battle, but it felt unfinished, like a door left ajar. The night the board removed her from her position, I'd gone home feeling satisfied, but not whole. I kept thinking about her face that last moment when the vote was called. The way she'd stormed out, but kept her head high. The quiet hum of her car engine as she drove away. For someone who thrived on control, she didn't seem to know how to lose. And that terrified me. 2 days later, I got another letter from Kerren. This time, it wasn't an official HOA complaint or a threat of legal action. It was a personal letter written in careful, almost shaky handwriting. The envelope was plain, unmarked, no company logos. Inside, she had written a single paragraph. A plea dressed as an ultimatum. "I understand you think you've won. That your land is safe from us, but you've made a mistake. You've pushed me into a corner where I can't back down. I'll give you one last chance. You sell the orchard. I'll make sure you're compensated. If you don't, I will ensure you regret it." At first I laughed. Then I read it again. This wasn't about control anymore. It was about something darker. She wasn't just upset that she'd lost power. She was humiliated, vulnerable, and that made her dangerous. I spent the next few days contemplating my next move. I had everything in my favor. The county, the media, the community. They were all on my side. But Kerren wasn't the kind of person to back off just because she was cornered. No, she was the kind of person who would burn everything down just to watch it crumble. And the thought of that, of her ruining everything I'd built, made something inside me snap. So I decided it was time to end it. For good. I took a drive out to her house, not in my usual truck, but in a borrowed one. I didn't want her to see me coming, didn't want her to have the chance to hide behind her curtains or prepare some new tactic. I parked at the end of her street, a quiet cul-de-sac with homes all lined up in perfect rows. I walked the rest of the way, each step heavy with purpose. Kerren's house was exactly what you'd expect. Pristine, imposing, the kind of place where every corner was manicured and every window had its blinds drawn just so. I knocked. Once. Twice. She answered after a long pause, her expression a mix of defiance and weariness. "What do you want?" she asked before I could speak. I stared at her for a moment, taking in her appearance. Her suit was immaculate as usual, her makeup flawless, but there was a weariness to her eyes that I hadn't seen before. I'd broken her. Not just her power, but something deeper. I felt a flicker of pity, but it didn't last. "Let's talk," I said, stepping past her before she could protest. Inside, the air smelled of stale perfume and cleaning products. The furniture was expensive but uninviting, like a showroom. I could feel the tension in the room, the unsaid words, the fury bubbling just beneath her composed exterior. "I don't have time for games," she snapped, crossing her arms. I leaned against the door frame, calm but firm. "You're right. We're done with games. You wanted to take something from me. Now I'm taking something from you." Her eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about your power, Kerren. It's gone. The board ousted. You, the town, turned on you. And now it's time for you to understand what happens when you overstep." Her lips pressed together in a thin line. She didn't speak, but the fury behind her eyes was unmistakable. "You're right about one thing," I continued, my voice steady. "You've pushed me into a corner, but it's not my land you're going to lose." She took a step forward, jaw set, and in that moment, I knew she wasn't going to back down. She was going to fight until the bitter end. But I wasn't afraid. I'd spent too long living in fear of her, letting her control me with threats and manipulation. Now, I saw her for what she really was, a person with nothing left to lose, but so desperate to keep her grip on anything she could. "I could make your life miserable, Kerren," I said softly, "but I won't. Because you're already doing that to yourself." She flinched at the words, and I knew I'd hit a nerve. "You're finished," I added. "The community sees you for who you are now, and they won't stand for it anymore. Not after what you've done." She didn't say anything, but the way she clenched her fists told me everything. The fight was still there, but it was a losing battle. She was outmatched, and she knew it. I turned and left, walking away without a second glance. I didn't need to stay and watch her unravel. The real power had shifted, and Kerren Fielding was no longer the force she once was. The reign of terror she'd ruled over, this town with had come to an end, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. As I drove away, the weight of the finality settled in. I had won, not just the battle, but the war. And the orchard, my home, was mine once more.